The year is 2247. Humanity has long since ventured beyond the cradle of Earth, reaching for the stars and establishing a complex web of colonies across the cosmos. Among these distant settlements lies Mizrael, a shining beacon of peace and democracy. A testament to human resilience in the pursuit of a just society, Mizrael stands as a beacon of hope in a galaxy often marred by conflict. The planet thrives on the principles of diplomacy and understanding, its inhabitants valuing knowledge and cooperation above all else. Mizrael's commitment to peace, however, does not stem from weakness. It is a deliberate choice, a testament to their belief in the inherent good within all beings. They believe in rehabilitation and offering even the most hardened criminals a chance at redemption. This inherent compassion, however, will be put to the ultimate test. Mizrael's bustling spaceports welcome travelers from across the galaxy, fostering a vibrant hub of cultural exchange. Scientists and artists collaborate on groundbreaking projects, pushing the boundaries of human ingenuity. The heart of Mizrael pulses with a vibrant energy, a symphony of progress and collaboration. In the depths of the uncharted territories lies Humyass, a planet cloaked in darkness, both literally and metaphorically. Unlike Mizrael's vibrant hues, Humyass is a desolate wasteland, its surface scarred by centuries of war and industrial exploitation. Its inhabitants, hardened by hardship and ruled by a regime that prizes power above all else, are a stark contrast to the peace-loving citizens of Mizrael. Humyass, under the iron-fisted rule of General Humyass, has become synonymous with fear and oppression.
Fear is the ultimate weapon, a tool to bend others to my will.
Humyass, a ruthless dictator driven by an insatiable lust for power, has plunged the galaxy into chaos time and time again. His methods are brutal, his ambition boundless, and his disregard for life absolute. Humyass sees Mizrael's peace-loving ways as a weakness, a vulnerability he is all too eager to exploit. He believes that fear is the ultimate weapon, a tool to bend others to his will. His eyes, cold and calculating, see the galaxy as a game of dominance, and he will stop at nothing to ensure his victory. Humyass views Mizrael's compassion as a weakness, a vulnerability to exploit for his own gain. The people of Humyass, ground down by generations of tyranny, live in fear of Humyass's regime. They are but pawns in his game of galactic domination, their lives expendable in his pursuit of power. Humyass has systematically crushed any dissent, his iron grip suffocating any flicker of rebellion. Those who dare challenge his authority are swiftly silenced, made examples of to quell any further uprising. Fear is the lifeblood of his regime, coursing through the veins of Humyass, a constant reminder of his absolute control. The contrast between Humyass and Mizrael is stark, a chilling reminder of the ever-present struggle between light and darkness, peace and chaos. While Mizrael reaches for the stars with hope and optimism, Humyass claws its way through the galaxy, leaving a trail of destruction and despair in its wake. Their destinies, however, are about to collide in a conflict that will test the very core of Mizrael's beliefs and force them to confront the true cost of compassion in a galaxy where darkness often holds sway. The bustling spaceport of New Jerusalem, Mizrael's main hub of interstellar travel, hummed with its usual energy. Sleek starships adorned with the flags of countless worlds docked and departed, their arrivals and departures a testament to Mizrael's peaceful integration with the galaxy. Families, returning from intergalactic vacations, laughed as they wheeled their luggage through the terminal, their faces alight with the joy of reunion. Diplomats, their robes adorned with the symbols of their respective planets, strode purposefully through the crowds, their minds focused on maintaining the delicate balance of galactic diplomacy. The air crackled with the buzz of countless languages, a symphony of communication that spoke volumes about Mizrael's tolerant and welcoming society. Unbeknownst to the unsuspecting crowds, a group of cloaked figures moved through the terminal with chilling purpose. Their faces, hidden beneath dark hoods, betrayed nothing, their movements a study in controlled precision. Beneath their nondescript attire they carried weapons of terrifying power, weapons designed not for war, but for terror. These were the soldiers of Humyass, their hearts hardened by General Humyass's brutal regime, their minds twisted by his poisonous ideology. They were but wolves in sheep's clothing, their presence a harbinger of the chaos that was about to engulf the peaceful spaceport. The first sign of trouble came as a high-pitched whine pierced the air, a sound that sent chills down the spines of those who recognized it. It was the unmistakable sound of a weapon charging, a weapon capable of unimaginable destruction. Panic erupted as the cloaked figures threw back their hoods, revealing their faces, twisted into masks of cold hatred, their eyes burning with fanaticism. Screams filled the air as the soldiers of Humyass opened fire, their weapons unleashing a storm of energy that ripped through the crowd, cutting down innocent men, women, and children indiscriminately. The peaceful spaceport transformed into a scene of unimaginable carnage. The air, once filled with the sounds of laughter and conversation, now echoed with the deafening roar of weapons fire, the screams of the dying, and the desperate pleas of those caught in the crossfire. The smell of burning flesh and ozone filled the air, a sickening stench that would forever be etched into the memories of those who survived. The soldiers of Humyass, reveling in the terror they had unleashed, moved through the carnage with chilling efficiency, their weapons spitting death and destruction. News of the attack spread like wildfire across Mizrael, carried on the airwaves and through the neural networks that connected their society. The images, beamed directly into homes and workplaces, showed the horrific aftermath of the attack, the once vibrant spaceport now a smoldering ruin littered with the bodies of innocent civilians. The citizens of Mizrael, accustomed to peace and tranquility, struggled to comprehend the scale of the violence that had been visited upon them. Fear, a foreign emotion to many, began to take root, spreading through their society like a virus. The attack on New Jerusalem sent shockwaves through the highest levels of Mizrael's government. Prime Minister Abramov, a man known for his calm demeanor and thoughtful approach to leadership, found himself struggling to maintain his composure as he watched the horrific images flicker across his desk monitor.
The attack was not just an act of violence, it was a calculated assault on the very heart of our civilization, a direct challenge to our values of peace and diplomacy.
Emergency meetings were convened, advisors and military leaders rushing through the corridors of power, their faces grim, their voices hushed but urgent. The attack had struck a blow against Mizrael's very identity, and the question on everyone's mind was, who would do such a thing? And why? Whispers of Humyass, a name synonymous with brutality and terror, began to circulate through the halls of power. Humyass, a planet shrouded in darkness, had long been a source of instability in the galaxy. Its ruthless dictator, General Fictional, known for his disregard for human life and his insatiable lust for power. Could this be his doing? Had Fictional finally set his sights on Mizrael, determined to crush their peaceful society under his iron fist? The thought filled them with dread, for they knew that if Humyass was behind the attack, then this was only the beginning. The fear that had gripped Mizrael intensified when a chilling message began to circulate across their communication networks. General Fictional, his face a mask of cold disdain, appeared on countless screens, his voice a grating rasp that sent shivers down the spines of all who heard it.
Mizrael, in your naivete, you believe in peace and diplomacy. You think your compassion is a strength, offering even the most hardened criminals a chance at redemption. But you are weak. The attack on New Jerusalem was no random act of violence. It was a carefully calculated strike, a taste of the devastation I'm capable of unleashing. I have taken hostages, innocent civilians, snatched from the spaceport during the chaos of the attack.
Their faces, pale and drawn, flickered across the screens, their eyes wide with terror, a stark contrast to the cold, calculating gaze of their captor.
I demand the release of 50 convicted terrorists, individuals responsible for some of the most heinous crimes in galactic history. You have 24 hours. Comply and the hostages will be returned. Refuse and they will die, one by one, their executions broadcast across the galaxy. The choice is yours. Peace in exchange for the very principles that define you. Or war. A war that you cannot win. A war that will drown your world in blood. The clock is ticking.
The weight of Fictional's ultimatum pressed down on Prime Minister Abramov with crushing force. The fate of Mizrael, the lives of his people, rested on his shoulders, a burden no leader should have to bear. In the quiet solitude of his office, surrounded by the soft glow of holographic displays, he wrestled with a decision that cut to the very core of his being.
My heart aches for the hostages, innocent souls caught in a web of terror not of their making. I see their faces, etched with fear and uncertainty, their families torn apart by unimaginable cruelty. The thought of their blood staining the sterile floors of a Mayan prison cell fills me with cold dread. Yet to surrender to Fictional's demands, to release those who have committed unspeakable acts of violence and terror, feels like a betrayal of everything Mizrael stands for.
These were not mere criminals, but individuals who had perpetrated atrocities that defied comprehension, their hands stained with the blood of innocence. To unleash them back into the galaxy, to allow them to walk free, unpunished, felt like an act of supreme irresponsibility, a violation of the very principles upon which Mizrael had been founded.
Is it possible to negotiate with a man who revels in terror, who sees compassion as a weakness to be exploited? Can I, in good conscience, condemn innocent lives to save a society that has built its foundation on the very principles Fictional seeks to destroy?
The clock ticked relentlessly, each second a hammer blow to Abramov's resolve. He knew that inaction was not an option, that indecision would only lead to further bloodshed. But what choice did he have? To give in to Sionis's demands would be to betray the very soul of Mizrael, to abandon the principles that had guided them for centuries. But to refuse was to condemn innocent lives, to sentence them to a fate too horrific to contemplate. It was a decision that would haunt him, no matter which path he chose. Section 3. The Diplomat's Dilemma. Leah Ashkelon, Mizrael's chief diplomat, found herself torn between her deeply held beliefs and the horrific reality unfolding before her. She had built her career on the power of dialogue, on the conviction that even the most intractable conflicts could be resolved through diplomacy and understanding. The attack on New Jerusalem, however, shook her faith to its core, forcing her to confront the limitations of her ideals in a galaxy where brutality often held sway. Ashkelon had spent countless hours studying Mayas, trying to comprehend the motivations of a society that seemed so alien to her own. She had pored over reports, analyzed speeches, and engaged in back-channel communications, all in a desperate attempt to find a peaceful resolution to the crisis. But Sionis's ultimatum, his cold-blooded disregard for human life, filled her with a chilling sense of dread. She realized, with a sinking heart, that she was dealing with a force that respected only power, a force that viewed diplomacy as a sign of weakness. The thought of resorting to violence, of betraying Mizrael's core principles, filled her with a profound sense of unease. She understood Captain Haim's arguments, respected his pragmatism, but the idea of stooping to Sionis's level, of becoming the very thing they abhorred, left a bitter taste in her mouth.
There has to be another way. There has to be a solution that doesn't involve sacrificing our humanity.
Ashkelon knew that time was running out, that every moment of indecision brought them closer to the unthinkable. She racked her brain trying to find a diplomatic solution, a way to appeal to whatever shred of humanity might still reside within Sionis. But deep down, a cold realization began to take hold. Sometimes the most compassionate act is to stand up to evil, even if it means compromising one's ideals in the process. Section 4. Hope amidst despair. In the cold, sterile confines of a Mayan prison cell, Miriam Cohen, one of the hostages taken from New Jerusalem, clung to hope. Stripped of her freedom, surrounded by the palpable fear and uncertainty of her fellow captives, Miriam refused to surrender to despair. She had seen the images of the attack, witnessed the brutal efficiency of the Mayan soldiers, felt the cold steel of their weapons against her skin, and yet, a flicker of defiance burned within her. Miriam had always believed in the strength of her people, in their unwavering commitment to peace and justice. She knew that Prime Minister Abramov and the leaders of Mizrael would move heaven and earth to secure their release, that they would exhaust every diplomatic channel, explore every possible avenue for a peaceful resolution. But she also understood the depths of Sionis's depravity, the cruelty that lurked beneath his cold, calculating exterior. The prison cell, a concrete box devoid of any semblance of comfort, became a microcosm of the larger conflict engulfing their world. Fear and uncertainty hung heavy in the air, punctuated by the muffled sobs of those who had lost all hope. But amidst the despair, Miriam saw glimmers of resilience, acts of kindness that defied their captors' attempts to crush their spirits. She saw it in the way the hostages comforted each other, sharing their meager rations, offering words of encouragement, and clinging to the shared belief that they would one day see their homes again. She saw it in the quiet defiance of those who refused to be broken, who held their heads high despite the circumstances, their spirits unbroken. And she saw it in the faintest glimmer of hope, a hope that flickered like a candle in the darkness, a hope that whispered of a better tomorrow, a tomorrow where peace would prevail and justice would be served. Section 1. A Nation Divided. Captain Haim's proposal sent a collective gasp through the room. The Prime Minister's advisors, their faces pale with shock, shifted uncomfortably in their seats, their voices hushed but urgent as they debated the implications of such a drastic measure. The very notion of using convicted terrorists as leverage, of mirroring the brutality of their enemies, struck at the very heart of Mizrael's identity, a society built on the foundations of compassion and rehabilitation. The room crackled with tension, the air thick with the weight of the decision before them. Could they, a nation that prided itself on its moral compass, truly bring themselves to cross this line, to abandon their principles in the face of such a stark choice? The news of Haim's proposal spread through Mizrael like wildfire, igniting a firestorm of debate that divided families, friends, and even strangers on the street. Holographic projections flickered to life in homes and public squares, broadcasting the unfolding crisis and the proposed solution. fueling passionate arguments that echoed through the once peaceful streets of New Jerusalem. Some argued that Haim's plan was an act of desperation, a necessary evil to combat an enemy that respected only strength. They pointed to the innocent lives hanging in the balance, the families torn apart by Sionis's cruelty, and the very real threat of further attacks if they failed to act decisively. Others, their voices trembling with a mixture of anger and fear, condemned the proposal as a betrayal of everything Mizrael stood for. They argued that to stoop to the level of their enemies, to embrace violence and retribution, would be to surrender the very soul of their nation, to become the monsters they sought to defeat. They pleaded for a peaceful solution, a return to diplomacy and dialogue, even as the clock ticked relentlessly towards Sionis's deadline. The debate raged on, a reflection of the deep moral dilemma that gripped Mizrael. It was a battle for the soul of a nation, a test of their commitment to their ideals in the face of unimaginable cruelty. The weight of their decision pressed down on them, a heavy burden that threatened to shatter the fragile peace they had fought so hard to maintain. Prime Minister Abramov found himself caught in the eye of the storm, the weight of the nation's hopes and fears resting squarely on his shoulders. He had built his career on the promise of a brighter future, a future where peace and understanding would prevail over violence and hatred. Now, faced with Sionis's ultimatum, he was being forced to confront the limitations of his ideals, the brutal realities of a galaxy where compassion often seemed like a naive and futile gesture.
The image of my predecessor, a kind but ultimately ineffectual leader, flashed through my mind, a cautionary tale of the dangers of inaction, of the price of clinging to hope in the face of overwhelming darkness.
Abramov spent countless hours in his office, surrounded by maps, intelligence reports, and the worried faces of his advisors. He listened intently to their arguments, weighed the potential consequences of each course of action, and desperately searched for a solution that would honor both his conscience and his duty to his people. The faces of the hostages, their eyes pleading for salvation, haunted his every waking moment, a constant reminder of the stakes involved. He knew that time was running out, that every second brought them closer to the unthinkable. He had to make a choice that would define his legacy and determine the fate of his nation.
I spoke of the attack on New Jerusalem, the innocent lives lost, and the families torn apart by Sionis's cruelty. I condemned the act as barbaric, a violation of the very principles upon which the galactic community was founded.
He spoke of the moral dilemma that faced them, the agonizing choice between upholding their values and protecting their people. He acknowledged the fear and anger that coursed through their society, the deep divisions that threatened to tear them apart. And then in a quiet but resolute voice, Abramov announced his decision.
I have authorized Captain Haim's plan with a crucial amendment. For every hostage killed, 2 convicted terrorists will be executed. This is not a decision born of vengeance, but of necessity. A desperate attempt to speak to Sionis in the only language he understands, the language of consequence. This is not a betrayal of our values, but a reaffirmation of our commitment to justice, a commitment to protecting the innocent from those who would seek to harm them.
Prime Minister Abramov, his face a mask of grim determination, concluded his address, leaving the nation in stunned silence. Leah Ashkelon watched the Prime Minister's address with a mixture of admiration and trepidation. She understood the agonizing choice he had been forced to make, the impossible position he had been thrust into. She knew that he had chosen the least worst option, the path that offered the best chance of saving the hostages while minimizing the damage to Mizrael's soul. But a part of her, the part that clung to the belief in the inherent goodness of all beings, couldn't help but feel a profound sense of disappointment.
I had spent my entire career advocating for peaceful solutions, believing that dialogue and understanding were the only way to bridge the divides that separated us from those who sought to do us harm. Now, I find myself complicit in a plan that seems to contradict everything I have ever stood for.
The thought of sacrificing even one life, even the life of someone who had committed terrible crimes, left a bitter taste in her mouth. She couldn't shake the feeling that they were crossing a line, venturing into dangerous territory from which there might be no turning back. But as the hours turned into days, and the news from Humyass remained ominously silent, Leah began to see the situation in a new light.
Sionis has shown no mercy, no willingness to negotiate, no regard for the sanctity of life. He deliberately targeted innocent civilians, reveling in their terror, using their lives as bargaining chips in his twisted game of galactic domination. To offer him compassion, to turn a blind eye to his brutality, would be to betray the very people I have sworn to protect.
Leah realized that true compassion wasn't about turning the other cheek or offering forgiveness to those who had shown no remorse. It was about standing up for the vulnerable, defending the innocent, and holding those who perpetrated evil accountable for their actions. It was about recognizing that sometimes the most compassionate act is to fight fire with fire, to meet violence with strength, and to send a clear message that there would be consequences for those who sought to spread terror and suffering.
True compassion is about standing up for the vulnerable, defending the innocent, and holding those who perpetrate evil accountable for their actions. Sometimes, the most compassionate act is to fight fire with fire, to meet violence with strength, and to send a clear message that there will be consequences for those who seek to spread terror and suffering.
The news of Mizrael's decision reverberated throughout the galaxy, sending shockwaves through the corridors of power and sparking heated debates in the streets of countless worlds. Some condemned Mizrael's actions as barbaric, a descent into the very depths of depravity they claimed to abhor. They accused them of hypocrisy, of abandoning their principles, and becoming the very monsters they sought to defeat. Others, however, saw a glimmer of hope in Mizrael's defiance, a recognition that even the most compassionate of societies had a right to defend themselves, to draw a line in the sand and say, "No more." The executions, when they came, were swift and clinical, carried out with a somber dignity that spoke volumes about the gravity of the situation. There was no joy in the act, no sense of vengeance or retribution, only a profound sadness for the lives lost and the difficult choices that had brought them to this point. Each execution was followed by a period of silence, a time for reflection and mourning, a reminder of the human cost of conflict and the fragile nature of peace. The impact of Mizrael's actions was immediate and undeniable. The galaxy watched, captivated by the unfolding drama, their attention drawn to the small, peace-loving nation that had dared to challenge the status quo, to stand up to a tyrant and say, "Enough." Humyass, for the first time, found himself facing an adversary who refused to be cowed by his threats, who met his brutality with a quiet but unwavering resolve. The balance of power, it seemed, had shifted, and the galaxy held its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. The galaxy, accustomed to Mizrael's peaceful nature, watched in stunned silence as the executions commenced. The images, broadcast across the interstellar networks, sparked outrage and condemnation from some quarters, while others, hardened by the ever-present threat of conflict, saw a chilling necessity in Mizrael's actions. The debate raged on, echoing through the halls of power, the bustling marketplaces of distant colonies, and the quiet homes of everyday citizens. Mizrael, once a symbol of peace and diplomacy, had become a lightning rod for controversy, their actions forcing the galaxy to confront the complex realities of justice and compassion in a universe often defined by violence. On planets that had long suffered under the yoke of tyranny, where the echoes of oppression still lingered in the air, Mizrael's actions resonated with a sense of grim satisfaction. They had seen firsthand the devastating consequences of appeasement, the way it emboldened dictators and perpetuated cycles of violence. To them, Mizrael's actions were a long overdue act of defiance, a sign that even in the face of overwhelming power, there was still a place for courage and resolve. The galactic community, a tapestry of diverse cultures and ideologies, found itself deeply divided. Diplomatic envoys shuttled between planets, their starships cutting through the vast emptiness of space, carrying messages of both condemnation and support. The Galactic Council, a body formed to maintain order and foster cooperation among the stars, convened emergency sessions, their holographic chambers buzzing with the cacophony of 1,000 languages as they struggled to formulate a response to the unfolding crisis. The weight of the galaxy's gaze fell heavily upon Mizrael, their actions scrutinized and debated on a scale they had never before experienced. Yet, amidst the storm of controversy, they held firm, their resolve unwavering, their belief in the righteousness of their cause unshaken. They understood the risks, the potential consequences of their actions, but they also recognized the terrible price of inaction, the blood that would stain their hands if they allowed Humyass's reign of terror to continue unchecked. Within Mizrael, the debate raged on, albeit with a newfound intensity. The executions, while met with a degree of grim acceptance by some, had also stirred a deep unease within their society. The images of the condemned, their faces etched with a mixture of fear and defiance as they met their fate, haunted the dreams of many, a constant reminder of the heavy price they were paying for their defiance. The streets of New Jerusalem, once abuzz with the energy of a thriving civilization, now bore a palpable tension. Public gatherings, once commonplace, became infused with a sense of caution. as if the shadow of Sionis's cruelty had stretched across the vast gulf of space to touch them. Parents held their children a little closer, their hearts heavy with unspoken fears, while friends and neighbors exchanged worried glances, their conversations laced with a mixture of hope and apprehension.
The executions, while necessary to save the hostages, have also exacted a heavy toll on our collective conscience.
Prime Minister Abramov, his face etched with the strain of leadership, found himself walking a tightrope, balancing the demands of justice with the preservation of Mizrael's soul. He spent sleepless nights agonizing over intelligence reports, weighing the potential consequences of their actions, desperately searching for a way to end the crisis without further bloodshed. Leah Ashkelon, her initial reservations about the executions notwithstanding, found herself thrust into the heart of the diplomatic maelstrom. She worked tirelessly, her diplomatic skills honed to a razor's edge, navigating the treacherous currents of galactic politics, seeking to build alliances and garner support for Mizrael's cause.
The galaxy is watching, judging our every move. We must show them that Mizrael's actions are not those of a nation consumed by vengeance, but of a people fighting to protect the innocent and uphold the very principles that Sionis seeks to destroy.
As the crisis deepened, a profound shift began to occur within Mizrael. The initial divisions that had threatened to tear their society apart began to heal, replaced by a newfound sense of unity and resolve. The shared thread of Sionis's tyranny, the collective grief over the lives lost, and the unwavering belief in the righteousness of their cause forged a bond stronger than any they had known before. Synagogues and community centers across Mizrael became havens for those seeking solace and support. Rabbis and community leaders offered words of comfort and guidance, drawing strength from their shared faith and traditions. They spoke of the importance of resilience in the face of adversity, the power of forgiveness without forgetting, and the enduring belief in the triumph of good over evil. The citizens of Mizrael, accustomed to a life of peace and prosperity, discovered within themselves a wellspring of strength and determination they never knew they possessed. They organized volunteer efforts to support the families of the hostages, donated blood and supplies, and offered their skills and resources to the war effort. The arts flourished as musicians, writers, and artists channeled their emotions into works that expressed the nation's collective grief, defiance, and unwavering hope. Even as they prepared for the possibility of further conflict, the people of Mizrael held fast to their core values. They refused to let Sionis's cruelty extinguish the light of compassion that burned within them. They understood that true strength lay not in mirroring their enemy's brutality, but in remaining true to themselves, even in the darkest of times. They would fight for their people, for their freedom, and for the very soul of their nation, but they would do so with a heavy heart, their actions tempered by a profound respect for the sanctity of life. Days turned into weeks, each sunrise a chilling echo of Mizrael's resolve. The executions, carried out with somber precision, had cast a pall over the galaxy. While some condemned Mizrael's actions, many more watched with a growing sense of awe. Sionis, used to operating in a climate of fear and appeasement, found himself facing an enemy he had underestimated. The fortress of Humyass, built on a foundation of brutality and fear, began to show cracks. Whispers of dissent, once unthinkable under Sionis's iron-fisted rule, began to circulate through the shadowed corridors of power. The Mayan elite, their loyalty bought and paid for with the spoils of conquest, started to question the wisdom of their leaders' actions. The executions, broadcast across the galaxy for all to see, had shaken them. The sight of their own soldiers captured during raids on Mizraeli outposts, being marched to their deaths in the name of a cause they no longer believed in, chipped away at their carefully constructed facade of obedience. The common citizens of Humyass, ground down by generations of oppression, watched the unfolding events with a mixture of fear and cautious hope. They had long since learned to keep their heads down, to avoid attracting the attention of Sionis's brutal enforcers. Yet, the sight of Mizrael, a nation they had been taught to view as weak and decadent, standing up to their dictator, sparked a flicker of rebellion in their hearts. Could this be the beginning of the end for Sionis's reign of terror? On Mizrael, the mood was a curious blend of sorrow and steely determination. The executions, while necessary, weighed heavily on the nation's conscience. Prime Minister Abramov, his face etched with the strain of leadership, found little solace in the strategic victories their actions had secured. He knew that every life taken, even the life of a convicted criminal, came at a cost. The burden of command, the weight of responsibility for the lives lost, pressed down on him with unrelenting force.
The burden of command, the weight of responsibility for the lives lost, pressed down on me with unrelenting force.
Leah Ashkelon, working tirelessly on the diplomatic front, found herself walking a delicate tightrope. She had become the face of Mizrael's resolve, her words carrying the weight of her nation's actions. She argued passionately for understanding, for a recognition that Mizrael had been forced into this corner, that their actions were born not of malice, but of a desperate need to protect their people.
Our actions are born not of malice, but of a desperate need to protect our people.
She spoke of the hostages still held captive on Humyass, their faces ever present in her mind, a reminder of the human cost of this conflict. As the pressure mounted, the cracks in Humyass's facade of power grew wider. Sionis, his authority waning, found himself increasingly isolated, his inner circle shrinking with each passing day. The news from the front lines was bleak. Mizrael, bolstered by the support of planets who admired their stand against tyranny, had taken the offensive, their once peaceful starships now bristling with weapons, their crews fighting with the ferocity of those who had everything to lose. The tide of the conflict had turned, and the galaxy watched in astonishment as the once invincible Mayan war machine faltered. Sionis, his face a mask of rage and disbelief, lashed out, his fury knowing no bounds. He ordered increasingly desperate attacks, each one met with fierce resistance, each one pushing his regime closer to the brink. The final blow came not on a distant battlefield, but within the heart of Humyass itself. A group of high-ranking military officers, their loyalty to Sionis shattered by his reckless disregard for their lives and the future of their planet, launched a daring coup. The palace, once a symbol of Sionis' absolute power, became a battleground, the sound of blaster fire echoing through its once sacred halls. Sionis, cornered and abandoned, his reign of terror finally at an end, was captured alive, a testament to the rebels' desire to see him face justice, not just the swift hand of vengeance. The news of his capture spread like wildfire across the galaxy, greeted with a mixture of relief and jubilation. The reign of terror was over, but the scars of Sionis' cruelty would take generations to heal. In the aftermath of the coup, a fragile peace settled over Humyass. The new government, eager to distance itself from the atrocities of the past, pledged cooperation with Mizrael, agreeing to return the hostages and hand over Sionis and his inner circle for trial. The galaxy, still reeling from the conflict, watched with cautious optimism, hoping that this marked a new chapter in their shared history, a chapter defined not by violence and oppression, but by dialogue, understanding, and a shared commitment to justice. The halls of justice on Mizrael, normally serene and contemplative, buzzed with an unprecedented energy. The trial of General Kyle Sionis and his inner circle, broadcast across the galaxy, had captivated billions. Here, in this sterile yet profound setting, the raw cost of Humyass's reign of terror was laid bare. Victims, their voices trembling with a mix of pain and defiance, recounted the horrors they had endured. Families torn apart by Sionis' cruelty displayed holographic images of loved ones lost. The weight of their suffering, their stolen futures, hung heavy in the air, a stark counterpoint to the cold, emotionless demeanor of the accused. Leah Ashkelon, her diplomatic skills honed to a razor's edge, found herself thrust into a new role, lead prosecutor. The weight of the galaxy's expectations rested on her shoulders. She knew that this trial was about more than just punishing the guilty. It was about accountability, about demonstrating that even in the pursuit of justice, Mizrael remained committed to the rule of law, to the principles that set them apart from the tyranny they had fought to defeat.
This trial is about more than just punishing the guilty. It's about accountability and demonstrating that Mizrael remains committed to the rule of law.
Her closing arguments echoed through the courtroom and across the galaxy, a testament to the enduring power of hope and resilience in the face of unimaginable darkness. The trial, however, ignited a new wave of introspection within Mizrael. The citizens, forced to confront the raw, visceral consequences of Sionis' actions, grappled with the complexities of their own choices. The executions, once viewed as a necessary evil, now sparked heated debates in homes, synagogues, and virtual forums. Had they sacrificed too much of their own humanity in the pursuit of justice? Could they, having stared into the abyss, ever truly return to the peaceful, compassionate society they once were? The verdict, when it finally came, was swift and unanimous, guilty on all counts. Sionis and his co-conspirators, their faces betraying no emotion, were sentenced to life imprisonment, their freedom forfeit, their names forever etched in the annals of history as symbols of cruelty and oppression. Yet even as the gavel came down, a sense of unease lingered in the air. Justice had been served, but at what cost? And could Mizrael, having tasted the bitter fruit of vengeance, truly find its way back to the path of peace and compassion? The aftershocks of the Mayan conflict reverberated throughout the galaxy, leaving an indelible mark on the political landscape. The Galactic Council, once content to operate in the shadow of larger powers, found a renewed sense of purpose, spurred by Mizrael's example to take a more active role in promoting peace and stability. New treaties were drafted, aimed at preventing future conflicts, while humanitarian aid flowed to planets still reeling from the effects of war and oppression. Mizrael, hailed by some as heroes, vilified by others as hypocrites, found itself at a crossroads. The scars of conflict ran deep, a constant reminder of the price they had paid for their survival. Yet amidst the uncertainty, a glimmer of hope remained. The younger generation, those who had come of age during the crisis, seemed determined to chart a new course for their nation, one that honored the sacrifices of the past while striving for a brighter future. Leah Ashkelon, her name now synonymous with both diplomacy and unwavering resolve, found herself thrust onto the galactic stage. She traveled from planet to planet, her starship a symbol of Mizrael's commitment to a more just and equitable galaxy. She spoke of the need for dialogue, for understanding, and for a recognition that true strength lay not in military might, but in the courage to choose compassion over vengeance, even when faced with unimaginable evil.
True strength lies not in military might, but in the courage to choose compassion over vengeance, even when faced with unimaginable evil.
The galaxy, forever changed by the events that had unfolded, watched and listened, their own destinies intertwined with the choices Mizrael would make. The path ahead was uncertain, fraught with challenges and unforeseen dangers. But as the people of Mizrael looked to the stars, they carried with them a hard-won wisdom, a deep understanding of the delicate balance between justice and compassion, and an unyielding belief that even in the darkest of times, the light of hope could never be extinguished.